Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. At some point that became my catchphrase. Anyway, I'm Jenny D and I'm one half of Illustrated Insights. And welcome to the Neurodiverse Creative Journal course. This week's topic is working memory. Do you have trouble remembering your passwords? Can you do mental arithmetic? Do you remember what you went into the shops for? If you answered no to any of these, you probably got a working memory problem just like me. So in this week's page, I'm going to actually be making a working memory game. There is some journaling on the page as well, just talking about how I feel about my working memory and listing some working memory games. And there's also a brief little discussion about what working memory is and how it can affect you. Anyway, let's get started.
Here's my new double page. Some of the ink from the previous page bled through, but that's okay. Most of it will be covered up and anything still visible will just add more interest. This week's topic is working memory, so I start my page by eliminating any white space on the clean page. I'm just writing down whatever thoughts come up about working memory. My working memory is very poor thanks to a double whammy of ADHD and dyslexia. And I'm not a therapist, but it's a special interest of mine and something I work at improving for my literacy students. So I've done quite a bit of research, and the working memory exercises are something that we keep working at. And that's why I decided that this page will have a double function. Not only will it be a creative journaling page for me to write my thoughts on, it's going to hold a little working memory game, so that every time I open this journal, I can take out that little game and keep working at improving my working memory. As usual, I'm using a watercolour pencil here, which will blur underneath the next layer. Over the top of my brain dumping watercolour pencils, I make blocks of colour with water-soluble crayons. These are a mix of Inktense colour sticks and Derwent art bars. I already know this page is going to be a mix of warm colours like pink, orange and burgundy. Once the colour is down, I spread it around with clean water and a soft brush. Those watercolours didn't cover the ink that bled through quite as much as I'd hoped. So I add some more background colour with acrylic paints. I like to make flicks with paint on my brush in diagonals, and I let the colour blend on the page. I only left a small piece of the watercolour layer uncovered in the middle, but building up layers not only adds interest, it helps me relax into the creative process. I'm going to make a little pocket for my game to sit in. So I cut a piece of white card, which is 5 centimetres by 14.5 centimetres. That will sit just at the bottom of one page. To make an invisible hinge for the pocket, I take a piece of tape that's the width of the page, and I just press the top half of the tape to the page. Then I fold the tape back and press the card on top. Next, I do the same for both sides. So the pocket is taped down, but you can't see the tape. And then I paint the pocket with the same colours as the background. I let that dry without the heat gun so that the glue of the tape won't be affected. In the next layer, I use our stencil flowers and some warm colours. The paint is pretty wet, so the lines blur a bit as I stipple through the lines of the stencil. But that's okay because this isn't the final layer. I made sure I did some over the pocket too, to help it blend in with the rest of the page. After that really wet stenciling layer, I decided I wanted a more subtle, drier stenciling layer. So I've used our brand new Stencil Wren eggs and some red acrylic paint, but I made sure that the paint was really quite light and dry as I stenciled it through the holes of the stencil. This gives a much softer and more subtle effect. Now I'm going to use that stencil flowers in a completely different way. I'm tracing around the shapes on top of some collage papers, some gel prints that I did earlier, and then I'll cut these flower shapes out to make some collage for my page. There's not a lot of that satin gel media left in my tub, so I found I needed a brush to get down into the tub, but I actually liked the way the brush worked. So you put down some gel medium on the page, put down your shape, and then go over the top again with the gel media. This will dry clear. The gel media also had the added advantage of activating the black lines from when I drew in the shapes, and I was able to smudge those right out and you couldn't see them anymore. As usual, I dried that layer with a heat gun, and then the next layer I'm using some Artline ink and a hand carved stamp to add some leaves to my little floral arrangement. I printed out my title using my computer and a printer, and then I used the satin gel media to glue it to the page. Unfortunately, I do only have an inkjet printer and the satin media smudged my title. So I'll go back in and I'll fix that up with a fine line pen a little later on. But for now, I'm using my burnt carmine watercolour pencil and I'm going around the edges of that copy paper to help that title connect with the rest of the page. And I use a soft brush with a little water just to blend that colour out. And just before I start journaling, I tidy up that title. And I start journaling by just listing a few working memory games. So it's finally time to discuss this week's topic. Working memory is a cognitive function that is affected in all neurodiverse individuals. This very high level of cognitive function requires the brain to hold information at the same time as manipulating that information. For example, mental arithmetic. Not only do you need to remember the numbers involved, you have to remember the rules around the calculation. The good news is that it is possible to improve working memory. Games that require you to remember a list while listening to others or remembering where an object is can increase the amount of information we hold at one time. So once I journaled about that, I made myself a set of concentration cards. I took a photo of one of my favourite collage papers, reduced its size, duplicated it, and then printed it out on card. As soon as I'd cut them out, I added a number from 0 to 8 on the backs of the cards. There's 2 of each number. And I made sure I tested this paint pen just to ensure that it wouldn't bleed through to the other side and I couldn't cheat. To play concentration, shuffle the cards, then place them face down in a grid. Turn the cards over in pairs, and when you get a match, you remove the cards from the grid. Time yourself to see how quickly you can do it. And the more often you play, the stronger your working memory will become. I tuck all my cards into the pocket I made in my Neurodiverse creative journal. There are a few spots that the paint had stuck the pocket together, so I just carefully lifted the pocket open, tucked in the extra bits of paint, and then slipped my cards inside. Here's the finished spread. Next time I open my journal, I'll be sure to give myself a game of concentration to help improve my working memory. Use the prompt, "How's your working memory?" and create your own page. We'd love to see it. Come and join our community on Facebook. I'll leave the link down in the description. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe so that you can join us next week. The topic is hyperfocus. See you next week.